Epic Sages, your home for adventure. Crafting worlds where your story's the center. Gear and tools for the brave and the bold. Your journey begins as the tale unfolds.
Step inside where the legends begin. Maps, dice, and stories, the magic within. Adventure in mind, we're here by your side. At Epic Sages, where heroes collide. Every campaign, every turn, every fight, we give you the tools, you shape the night. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. With adventure in mind and your own passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. From online to in-store, we've got what you seek. Gear for your quest, world so unique. Your heroes rise, we light the way. Epic Sages, your guide through the fray. No matter the path, no matter the game, your story is yours, we fuel the flame. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. With adventure in mind and your own passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. From your first roll to battles well fought, we give you the gear for the stories you've sought. At Epic Sages, the tools are designed with passion and care and adventure in mind. Your world, your rules, your epic tale. With Epic Sages, you will never fail. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. With adventure in mind and your own passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. We light the way, you shape the venture. Epic Sages, your home for adventure. From online to in-store, we've got what you seek. Gear for your quest, world so unique. Your heroes rise, we light the way. Epic Sages, your guide through the fray. No matter the path, no matter the game, your story is yours, we fuel the flame. Epic Sages is where you find satisfaction. With adventure in mind and your own passion. We control the board, you control the action. Epic Sages, where legends find traction. We light the way, you shape the venture. Epic Sages, your home for adventure.
Hello. Welcome to tonight's episode 4-8, Icons versus Everybody, knowing where you stand. So, let's get right into it. Introduce everybody. Get the hellos from my friends. And we'll sing birthday songs later, probably. Happy birthday, us. Wahaha. But we'll get into that. We'll start with ladies first. Kathryn, tell us who you are, where people can find you, all that fun stuff. You're a returning guest, so people should know your face at this point.
I am a returning guest. I was very lucky last year to be on. So I'm Kathryn. I'm an editor for WriteEditShare.com. And I also happen to be an accidental author to go along with that. So I have a website there for WriteAging.life. So that's where my writing resides, since I try to keep my life separated, sort of.
Well, at least someone's organized in this group.
Yeah, I don't know I go that far, but I'm trying.
All right, cool beans. Well, jumping over to our next guest, our new guest, Wahaha. Brian, who are you? What do you do? Tell us about yourself. Where can we find you?
Hey, I'm Coach Brian. I'm down here in Akron, Ohio, and I'm a health coach. And I help people balance out their lifestyles, help them better understand nutrition, fitness, stress management, time management, all sorts of different things that ultimately get them to be their best self. Whether it's losing weight or improving digestion or chronic illness, performance, those are some of the things that I've dealt with for the last 20 plus years, helping people get back to their healthiest version of themselves.
Fantastic. And where can people find you?
BrianParana.com.
Easy
is
peasy.
easiest place, or Coach Brian Parana at the socials.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was gonna say you've been tagging some of our stuff, so he's pretty easy to find. Wahaha. And last but not least, down at the bottom here, Guy. Who are you? What you do? Where are you from? All that fun stuff. Excuse the sniffles.
Hello,
over here.
Rook, also a pun. My name is Guy. I'm a teacher by trade. I have advanced degrees, to BAs and masters of art history, English literature, and general history. I also teach at a school level, high school. I also for the past 7 years, I've been teaching at the preparatory school for English at the university, and I've been an exams overseer in the Open University. I'm also a writer, a poet, an artist, and etc.
All the fun stuff. I gotta say, some of the artwork you posted the other day was pretty good. So if you got Guy on your Facebooks, check that out. So,
Thanks.
getting into the topic icons versus everyone, right? So we're gonna start this off the classic way, and I'll start with Guy on this one. When I say icons versus everyone, what is the first image that pops into your head?
Well, it's like, do you want like Larry Bird or Shaq, or do you want, Optimus Prime or Megatron? Yeah. So who is the goat essentially? Who is the laser focus, the focal point of the story? Well, it's a complicated question. If you're talking about a Russian novel from the 19th century, and you're talking about, a sprawling narrative that spans across hundreds and hundreds of pages, there's going to be thousands of different characters, and you don't actually know who is the one that's pulling the strings, who is the one that moving the narrative, the plot along. Um, well, um, it depends. The question of power versus knowledge is, all this time. When we talk about someone who is in power and can actually voice their own opinion, their own ideology to, disseminate their own perspectives on the populace, or someone who can actually manipulate the populace via his own rigor, intellect, studiousness, etc. So it depends on what you want to put your focus on.
Okay,
If that's a character, sorry.
no, that's a great stepping off point, because that is something we are going to talk about, is the focus of the icon that we're speaking about at the time. So I'm going to cut you off here and let other people go, because you're jumping into topics before we get there. Wow. All right, jumping up to Kathryn.
Yeah, so I actually totally go with Guy's answer, because as living in the publishing industry, there are huge icons, and they've got multi-million-dollar book deals, and yet, if they only were the only ones writing their books, we'd all be bored. So let's take the example perhaps of, when I think of dragons, I instantly think of Anne McCaffrey, but she wasn't originally an icon. She was just everyone, but yet she became the icon because she took dragons from fantasy and shifted them into sci-fi. And how can you not consider her an icon for doing that?
I'm 100% behind that opinion. I love Anne McCaffrey stuff. The White Dragon's probably one of my favorite books that I read as a kid. But jumping over to Coach Brian, when you think icons versus everybody, what's the image that pops into your head? What's the first thing you think about?
Piggybacking off our other two guests, icons in at least my space, the health, fitness, and such. I think Jack LaLanne, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the list goes on and on. And even with Jillian Michaels. We got to throw a female out there, but these are people that kind of lead the way and then guide us to help follow through with what could be the right path to follow. But also, when we talk about everyone, we're talking about everyone in their individual life and the situations, the sequences of events that happen to them, and how they can be able to manage their day to day. And icons are also just people too, when it's all said and done in our world as being just human. So
Okay, and again, something we'll touch on in a little bit. That's a good segue. Younger, jumping over to you. We're talking in the D&D realm when we're talking icons versus everybody. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
So there's two interconnected pieces that come to mind whenever you say like the icon. So as everybody mentioned so far, like icons, like people often refer to as people. But when people think of an icon like of strength, and they're thinking of Hercules, right? Hercules is only the the fruition of like a living embodiment of strength, right? But strength is the actual symbol. Like icon is a type of symbol. So Hercules was a symbol of strength, even after he's dead or defeated or any number of things, right? And so those symbols can live on beyond past the the life expectancy of the people who embody those greater things, such as like strength or whatever. In which case, when you have an icon, not all strength, for instance, like not all Hercules would be the good guy. Sure, the good guy in the story, he's the hero, right? But as in every story, there's always a villain to somebody. Like even if the bad guy in Hercules' story, like views Hercules as the villain, right? And each of those icons, the villainous icons, have their own symbology, and they might be able to raise a banner with an icon to lead an army, or a rebellion against the king, or any number of things.
Nice. Okay. So, jumping into my opinion for it, right? When we talk about icons versus everybody, at least in what I'm talking about here, is definitely that brand name versus non-brand name, right? The thing that you think, what's it? You think ice cream and you think Ben and Jerry's, right? That's a silly icon that you can use, right? You think, but then you have Briar stuff that has way more ice cream choices, way more stuff, is in way more places, right? It's kind of they do a lot more. There's a lot more of it, whether you realize it or not, right? One of the big ones recently, thank you TikTok, is all the fashionable handbags, right? Their everybody uses have been, being sold for $10 to $20 for years now, right? And the only difference between them and fancy label is literally the fancy label. Something Brian kind of touched on. They sometimes icons are just regular people that have a bit of branding behind them. But jumping off that, Guy brought up the focus of icons, right? Because you need to know what you were talking about to understand where we're kind of speaking at, right? So I'm going to start with Brian since you're the last one on this one. When we speak about icons in the health industry, right? What are like personal icons for you? What are things that you personally strive for and look for or try to be about, like so on and so forth?
as in people or qualities?
Either one or both.
Okay.
Well, I'll put two parts here. Let's start with people and then go to qualities.
Okay. As far as people, in my world, I'm looking at like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm looking at some of the. I would say I'm glancing at some of the Mr. Universes, right? That's just a portion, a small sliver of my world, but that'd be the thing that most people might think about. I'm thinking about, yeah, I own CrossFit gyms. There's certain athletes that stood out, especially in my time with Froning and Jason Klippa. I'm thinking about people that did bold thing. You saw Usain Bolt, right? You go down the list. I even worked with an Olympic athlete, Sofia Reynoso. She was a Mexican kayaker. I had the ability to work with her during Tokyo and Paris. She could definitely fulfill as an icon, as someone that is pushing the limits and the capacities of the human body and spirit to bigger, better levels, at least in the physical and mental capacities, because there's a significant amount of mental game going on there. So those are some initial with people. As far as qualities, I'm thinking leadership. I'm thinking bold. I'm thinking uh, energetic, influential, persuasive. I'm leaning toward the good persuasive, not the deceptive persuasive. Leave people better off than when you found them type persuasive. So those are some of the characters that kind, caring, that I think icons should embody to help everyone else be better.
Okay. I got a silly question for you as a follow up. Would you consider like Richard Simmons an icon?
Well, from the fitness perspective, he was one that started a lot of the group exercise. Actually, you want to see something funny? I got a a Richard Simmons chia. He doesn't have the chia head, but there you go. There he is.
Right.
My family got it for me, and I have it out here in my gym, and it's just a silly
true
thing.
icon.
Yeah. I mean, from the perspective of what he embodied in terms of help motivating people to take better care of himself, sure.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. Whenever that gets talked about, I feel like he gets skipped over a lot, but he got a lot of people off their butts. You know what I mean?
He did. He did.
And I'll kind of jump back to that one because that is one of the things we need to talk about is hidden icons or subversive icons. But jumping over, Kathryn, what about you? In your world, who are people that you have as icons personally, and then what are qualities for icons that you look with like your clients or people or things?
When I really so I'm a big sci-fi fantasy reader. I love sci-fi and fantasy. So, like I really want to lean that direction, and yet for today I'm gonna pause right there. Because I think, and I'm going to use Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen as some pretty big icons. And the reason why is because they took and created Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I worked for the literary agency when the literary agent that I worked for said, that is not a marketable book. We are not representing that. We're taking your business book. We can get that published. No problem. That Chicken Soup for the Soul thing, that is too unusual. And he's like, you guys are just going to have to shop it. You're going to have to shop it yourself, or you're going to have to self-publish it. And so that's exactly what they did. Like they went and they said, this is something we really want to do. People need these uplifting stories. So they created Chicken Soup for the Soul. They sold it at their speaking events as a bonus book that people could buy. And well, the rest is now history years later. Millions of copies sold, right? So they became an icon in the anthology, heartwarming story field in books simply because they were not willing to take no as the answer. I mean, they could have said, all right, it's a bad idea. We just won't do anything with it. And instead they said, no, we really believe in this vision of doing this book. And who knew that it was going to become, the hundreds of titles later that it has become. But when you think about it, that's a big step, and that's a big risk, and that's a big push. And that's somebody being creative and saying, no, we're going where our heart is leading us and where we really feel like we need to do this book. And so when I'm working with my clients who happen to come to me because they might be ready to self-publish, or they might just be asking for an editor before they send it off to a literary agency or a publishing house, I like taking on those clients that happen to be unique and willing to take some risks and tell stories that maybe are uncomfortable stories that maybe not everybody really wants to hear, but maybe there are those people out there who need to hear it. And so for me, I really anybody who's willing to take a risk, anybody who's willing to be creative, anybody who's thinking outside the box, I love cheering on those people who then later on become the icons. And you know, we look at all, I mean, in my life it's all about the publishing industry, but I can look at it in, you know, the health field, I can look at it in medicine, I can, you know, our world is richer when we have all those unique creative experiences and expressions. So I'm all for that sort of interaction and cheering people on to become the icons in their field where they want to be.
Interesting. So to kind of cap that, you appreciate the people that are doing something unique in your field, right? Those are the icons you're looking for. Someone that's bringing something interesting. Again, going back to McCaffrey, having dragons that are generally fantasy, shifting it into sci-fi. Iconic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
totally, totally, totally iconic.
Who's
You
your
know, and
dare?
right. Well, and I think that's the thing, right? I mean, like she took a huge risk.
And it paid off. How many?
20 some books later,
Exactly.
you know, I mean, like she wrote 20 books and they were bestsellers. And when people think about dragons, you think fantasy and science fiction, not just one or the other. So yeah,
I'm
bring on the unique and creative ideas.
helps that she had good characters too. That was
And I love that too.
All right, jumping down to Guy. When we're talking in the teaching world, right? When you're educating people, where are your personal icons at? Who are a couple people that are just like, if I could be that person or as close to them as possible, I would be. And then, what are icons you look for in students or things that they could represent or want to work with?
Icons I look for, okay, in the student populace, you mean?
Sure, yeah, or whoever you're teaching.
Okay. So I'm gravitating towards the literary world, although I have some real life inspirations, heroes that I would like to aspire to be, but I think it's better, you know, to stick to the literary world because everybody can be, you know, can be intelligent in retrospect, can speak eloquently about the subject in retrospect. So I can tell you about Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam. Wrote the Ship of Fools, I think that's the title. A very intellectual figure from the 17th century, I think, or earlier. Another one is one of the only persons that I can actually feel, or as far as I can tell, that lived by his own ideals and actually practiced them during his own lifetime is Lord Byron. In a lot of ways, there are a couple of other examples, uh, but yeah, what I was trying to say, yeah. So in the realm of art, which I also belong to, I can say that the icon for me, the representative of art, is obviously Van Gogh.
Ooh, interesting choice. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I could have said Picasso, or for example, I could have said Michelangelo, but I would like to point out another figure, a very obscure figure from the 16th century that we know hardly anything, almost nothing about his own life. Although I know a guy from university, a great Argentinian postdoctorate, that was writing a great dissertation about his own religious kind of outlook. A guy named Hieronymus Bosch from the, it was called the Netherlands until today, but today it's Belgium. A great artist. He was way ahead of his time, way out of this stratosphere, like punching a hole through the linear timeline. And he was such an inspiration, visually, his imagery and symbology and the kind of scenery and composition he could, gather up and actually produce is quite stunning and striking. And he lived most of his life in, poor, very meager, poor living conditions, monetary wise, even social status. I think his wife died when he married young, maybe 20 years or even younger than that. And she died maybe 4 or 5 years later. And they had a kid, and I think that kid also died. But he started losing his grip on reality as far as we know, and he became more and more devout, more religious. His famous triptych, I think it's in Ghent, in Germany. The triptych of the Final Judgment, a magnificent piece, chef d'oeuvre. Yeah. What was your other question?
So follow up to that, when you're working with your students and whatnot, what are the icons that you look for, right? The things that they represent as your students or
Yeah.
people that you're teaching. What do you when
Yeah,
you that's the one?
Yeah, every student has that kind of spark, and the dynamics change, from class to class. It tends to change because the personalities are different. They come from different backgrounds. They had different outbringings. Um, you know, in terms of social and financial, monetary means, parsimony. There are people who will, students, kids that will advance further due to their, very strong fundamental in terms of the support they garnered monetarily from their parents, from wealth, their families. Um, it depends on education. That's the other side of the coin. It depends on the way they are being raised. Um, if they are raised in ways that are not, actually congruent with success and, can't, um, something that impedes their um, their
Development.
progression. What?
Their development or progress.
Yeah, their development, their progress. At the end of the day, the fundamentally, when we are talking about crude numbers, if we want to crunch the numbers, then we want to produce more and more, graduates with a GED, a matriculation that is suffice. It upholds. It is. Um, you'll be eligible to advance to advanced studies, upper higher education, to pursue a career in a profession that you actually like, that you fostered, some kind of skill that you want to hone in your personal life, in your career, and you would like to pursue for the rest of your professional life. So,
So
sadly, that's a bottom point of school. But when we're talking about icons in the classroom, you're talking about students who are they are not they're not actually they don't have all the attributes or traits of a natural born leader, but they have this X factor. You know, they have that one thing that that magic wand that they can trigger or they can cast a spell on anyone they meet. They have that kind of you know um,
they got
that kind of effect
those high
that is
charisma stat
lasting.
peeps. I feel you. I feel you.
Yes, highly charismatic, highly studious. Um, Oftentimes, it doesn't mean that they're virtuous. It doesn't mean that they're going to be a virtuous, mature individual, a productive member of society and a contributing, member of the community. But it's an indicator, it's a precedent, uh, foretelling, predicting the future.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, charisma gets you pretty far. Speaking of charisma, jumping over to younger. When
Yeah,
we're
pretty fun.
when we're talking icons in our settings, what are some that you pop to instantaneously? And when you are teaching / playing with people and you're trying to mold your players into icons in their own setting, what are you looking for to expose there?
So
Yeah,
there's two big highlights on that. The highlights that I would take note of are the heroes and the villains. So like when a villain comes up, you need to set the scene. You need to show how scary they are. Maybe at the beginning of your campaign where all your heroes got together, they had a mentor, or some like super powerful badass leader who was like, always there, always the guy holding the stone up and everything. And then the good guys, they need some character development, and that guy is just cut down at the ankles. His Achilles tendon is shot. The boulder falls on top of him. He is utterly crushed under the weight of the villain and his power, his amassing army, and the characters witness it, and they're like, that guy was the hero that everybody wanted him to be, and I just saw him get utterly crushed and defeated. So if I want to be able to face this evil head on, I need to be able to create characters and create a group of powerful warriors strong enough to be able to combat it. We're going to have to go on the grand quest in order to get these artifacts in order to defeat him and his evil servants, things like that.
Okay. Now, when you jump into more of the player side, when you're working with real people and not necessarily their counterpart imaginary friends, what do you look for when you're developing a player at a table? How do you build them into the icons that they want to become? Because everyone wants to be a level 20 superhero, right? They all want to be the best, the coolest, the guy at the table that everyone giggles at.
So it's kind of funny, and I think I'm going to hit on like some of the notes that like Brian mentioned in his instance, but these characters are just that. They are characters of people, right? So if you want to develop your characters, maybe you need to develop the person as well, right? You can't exactly be like, you're a good guy because you say you are. It's like, no, like what can your character actually do in order to facilitate being witnessed as the good guy, right? You would have to do actions that would be considered good. If you're just walking around doing necromancy and killing people and burning down orphanages, like you're never going to be the good guy hero that you say you want to be. Maybe you should, like help some kids get adopted from the orphanage. Maybe
Burning it down, make sure it's empty.
you actually gotta You actually got to like train with them. You got to work with them. You got to be like, hey, like, what are the goals and aspirations that you have for your character? You know, just the same as in real life when you like have soldiers. You're like, hey, what are your goals and aspirations? And like, how can I facilitate that? You know, without just undercutting everybody else who's to your left and right, because I have to treat you all equally at the table or all equally under my leadership, you know, in order to help facilitate your growth in a positive manner so that you can have a positive influence on the rest of the people around you.
I think that builds into building icons relatively easily, right? Because we go back to, at the end of the day, icons are just people, right? Bringing that up is anyone can be there if they hit the right set of circumstances. Now, Guy brought up a great point. Sometimes money really helps with becoming an icon or having some quick influence. But at the end of the day, jumping into what Younger said, it's really what you do with it and how you behave with it. Now, I will touch on for a second here negative icons, right? Younger talked about the villain destroying the hero, right? Instantaneously supplanting the hero with a negative icon, something to strive towards, to fight against, to get better than, can be just as powerful as having a positive inspiration to go through, right? Sometimes anger is a good way to push stories, right? Whether it's righteous anger, petty anger, whatever, right? That's a fantastic avenue to build something, right? As long as there's some kind of payoff in the long run. You don't just get to be an angry or sad boy the entire time and then suddenly become the greatest thing ever. There has to be, there still has to be a little bit of progression somewhere, right? But with that, right, allowing your players to have negative icons, right, is just as powerful as having those positive mentors, right? Having the don't be this guy or I need to be better than this guy can be just as strong. And sometimes that person is the person you were 10 minutes ago, right? You're outrunning your past. And sometimes that's how icons get to be where they're at, right? They just don't want to be who they were. And that is a powerful storytelling method that you can use to be what's next, right? When we talk about other icons, right, is shared imagery, right? Something that everyone has come up in their own personal stories. I'm gonna start on this one and hold up the little book here, right? So like this little thing right here is called a beholder. Anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons and things like that has an idea of what a beholder is. They've heard it, they've seen it, they've heard, it's been around, right? Another good one for Dungeons and Dragons would be the Trask, the strongest monster in the books, right? The level 30, invincible, yada yada yada. Those are icons, right, that the players get to fight against, right? Sometimes, not always. Not all beholders are mindless monsters that murder you. Some of them are talking gangsters in a city somewhere, but that's a whole different story. So, jumping into the subversive kind of icons, right? When you guys are talking about your stuff, what is a subversive icon that you can identify immediately and be like, they weren't supposed to do that, but they did, and it worked out well? We're going to start with Kathryn.
Yeah, well, at this point in the writing world and the artist world in general, it's not really a person, it's AI.
Okay.
Ouch. Yeah. Because really AI is using everybody else's creativity to come up with something and spits out for somebody who puts a prompt in. And yes, there's some great starting points, but the flip side is that there are a lot of people who are just using AI and they're creating really fast ebooks and throwing them up on Amazon. And now Amazon's having all sorts of, they're locking lots of accounts just because too many people are kind of using the exact same AI responses. And so then it looks like plagiarism's happening, and, similar things are happening in the art world. I'm not as involved in that, but I've been on some discussion boards with authors about artwork for their book covers. And that has been something that also comes up. Your AI's trained on prior written and prior created art and prior knowledge of the human race, and that doesn't mean it's putting it all together the right way, but it sure makes things a lot faster for a lot of people. So there's, right now, I would say in the publishing world, especially, we're having some growing pains. And in some ways, that makes AI that negative icon because there's a growing pain as to how to use it as growth versus use it as easy money. So
And replacement.
and replacement, yeah. I mean, because I do have to say, we're not at the point where AI is perfect at editing. It is definitely not at the point where it can totally take over writing. There are some things that AI writes that I definitely can chuckle about because you can tell that they pulled a lot of sources from somewhere, I don't know, early 19th century, because we don't talk like that anymore. And it shows up in people's writing that they're writing in I mean, if they're talking that way, perhaps they've learned English a totally different way than I did, and they're not speaking it day to day with other people. But I mean, there's some vocabulary that has shifted over time, and so you can kind of tell that something's not quite right. But it's at some point, the question becomes, do we want human creativity or quick, easy written things that satisfy entertainment, but maybe aren't interesting and unique anymore? I don't know. There's a balance somewhere.
There's a balance. It's a positive
Yeah.
light in the future, but you're right. It's just as easily just a pile of slop that no one cares about. Guy, you look like you have things to add on to that statement, so I'll let you go next.
Yeah. Specifically to the AI, it's a scourge on the art world. I concur. I'm an arts teacher. I have an arts degree. Art history BA, and the amount of effort, and toil, blood and sweat, and bile and other, bodily fluids that I won't bother you with. Um, it's inconceivable that some kind of machine operated, manually by a human person, uh, can can produce the same kind of expression, the same kind of motifs, the same kind of nods and homages to the fellow masters, or it cannot provide the same mirror. In the Renaissance times, they called the painting, a window to reality. So it cannot be a window into reality. It cannot be a mirror, that reflects reality, like in the 17th century during the Rococo, the kind of mannerism
Cannot reach
period,
the
and
heart
the
of man.
Baroque. Sorry?
Cannot hit the heart of man.
Mhm.
Huh?
It doesn't have the heart of man in it.
Yes, it does not have the pyre of man, There is a reason why Prometheus actually was casted down. uh, Well, he was cast down on Earth. He was the first artist. He is the first. I'm not talking about in any theological or religious terms. I'm talking about metaphorically. The fire of creation, that progenitor of creation that was sparked in the human heart, came from that singular event. And to think that a computer could replicate, the thoughts and feelings and experiences, and, when it comes to olfactory, sensory, all that stuff, a computer thinks systematically, linearly. It tries to organize everything into numbers and patterns. It doesn't know how to to articulate articulate complex thoughts and feeling, and it certainly cannot express it via the medium of art, theater, dance, music, for example. It can't do that. Well, jumping back just a second to the well, I was thinking about an evil character, and let's talk about the word icon. The word icon, in its etymology, comes from the Greek ikonin, which means image. It's not like imago, it's something else. It's an image. And this is the image, the essence that we project, the persona, the mask that we, adorn and present to the world. This is the persona that people will perceive us as having. And I was thinking about the most evil character in modern literature. Well, not so modern, but Paradise Lost. Satan. Satan was the progeny of God. In terms of the beneficence of creation, and he spoiled, he squandered that heavenly love that was emanating from atop the Godhead, and he rebelled against God. Now, of course, you can talk about all the cultural influences on the literary piece, how King Charles was one of the most corrupt and hedonistic monarchs of the modern age. You can talk about that. But I think there's a lot of knowledge that can be attained from the voice of Satan himself. A lot of cunning knowledge, a lot of it's like Machiavelli and the book of the courtier. If you know Castiglione
Yeah, we talked about that a little
from
bit
the
last
Renaissance.
time. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great. I think I don't know if I mentioned it last time. Maybe I did, or maybe I
it
didn't.
was the last time or the first time you were on. I don't remember, but you've definitely talked about it before.
Yeah, maybe the book of the courtier. A very good book, written in the Renaissance by the Castiglione. It's essentially a codices, a codex for the mannerisms, the etiquette of the nobility, the heraldry, specifically the princes.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and I would think Satan is a good example of an evil character that is also the protagonist and is also the icon of the story, which is very rare. To be an evil character, the protagonist, and an icon, the driving factor in the story.
I agree. It definitely is rare to write from that perspective. We're gonna jump over to Brian really quick though, just because we don't have a ton of time. I want to have him talk a little bit on his stuff. Brian, on your side of things, jumping into the negative icons of your industry and what you deal with on the regular. Where was it, they kind of fall for you?
Yeah, definitely. The antagonists in the health and fitness industry, nutrition, diet culture, misinformation. It's going to be the quick, the fast, the easy, the 30 pounds in 30 days. It's going to be the pills and the potions and the lotions and this gadget and that gadget and this infomercial and that one as well. And those are the things that I'm constantly superseding in information correction with encouraging people to have a sustainable, realistic approach around how they operate in their day-to-day life to get to the outcomes that they want. 1-2 pounds is sustainable weight loss. I hate to tell you, per week. not 10 pounds in a week. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong. And it's very likely that whatever results that you have gotten are fleeting. They will be vanishing in weeks, months, and definitely in years. So those are going to be the things that really are the anti-icons in my world.
Okay, nice. So the get rich quick schemes, the things that are this sounds really good, I'm really popular, it doesn't actually work.
Not usually.
The Oprah isms. Uh, but yeah, okay. So when you think about those though, is there anyone that like is a proprietor of those that is like if you could stick away with from them you should for the most part without defaming anybody here, but is there anyone that you're just like, yeah, this is probably if it's on this thing, stick away from it?
A person, I guess one of the notable ones, maybe Dr. Oz
Okay.
might be one, just because was influential and on TV and had a lot about him. But the claims and different things, and after we look back, and it just wasn't best intentions, maybe singular intentions for himself with what he was promoting or saying.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
If I were to put a name on one person, I'm sure there's plenty others.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no, I got you. That makes sense. No,
whoever
I
came up with hydroxycut,
okay,
right?
fair. As a scientist in a lab somewhere. Um, Jumping on to the next question, probably be our last one, and I'll try to keep it relatively quick. Oh, sorry, Younger, I skipped you. So before I ask my last question, Younger, do you have any negative icons you want to add to the list of things we talked about?
Okay, yeah. So like everybody's gone for like the big bads, like the terrible things. I'm gonna go more for like the original shit poster. Like definitely wasn't a good guy by enemies. He's known as Diogenes the dog, right? And Diogenes the dog did a lot of crazy things down in Athens or other Greek states during the time where like philosophy was first blossoming. And you had all these great thinkers sitting around a table and doing stuff. And one of them, said something to the effect of like, man is like a featherless biped. And then Diogenes was like, plucked a chicken while it was alive and threw it in the middle of the room. And it was like, behold, a man. Like that's not a very nice or good thing, but he's definitely not necessarily like the typical like villain, but he was also the kind of guy who was like, I'll defecate in the street and I'll piss on you. That's why he was called Diogenes the dog. But despite the fact that he was like these all sound like terrible things, more or less like the people of Athens like put up with this guy. And he even got a lot of notoriety in his time. There is an instance, written account by two accounts, in regards to Alexander the Great had actually went to Athens, and he went and he spoke to all these various learning institutions and teachers and everything. And he was like, oh, well, like this is all great. And I came to see all these different philosophers. Like, oh, where's Diogenes? Like, oh, Diogenes ain't around here. He's like off in town sitting in his pot, like being poor and being crazy. Or he's like off. And so he eventually, Alexander the Great went looking for this guy. And this dude was laying under the shade in a tree. And Alexander the Great walked up to him and he was like, blocked the sunlight and stood over him, and it was like, hey, I'm Alexander the Great. Is there anything I can do for you? I'm basically the most powerful man on earth at the moment, conqueror of the known world. I could give you anything. Money, women, power, a mansion, you name it. I can provide, right? And because he was the king of kings at his time. And Diogenes was like, well, can you stand out of my sunlight? Like, that'd be nice. Like, this man could give him anything. And Diogenes was like, you can just get out of my way. And Alexander the Great was then like, for if I was not Alexander the Great, I would wish to be Diogenes, who just didn't give a shit, regardless of his circumstance. Like, he was poor and There's nothing necessarily great about him, but nothing could phase the dude. And so in his own way, Diogenes the dog was an icon at that moment for even Alexander the Great, who was the top of his pedestal of the known world at the time.
I do like some of his stuff. I think one of my favorite silly quotes from him is, "The only place you can spit in a rich man's house is in his face." Always makes me giggle.
Yeah, he's definitely like I said, he's the original shit poster. He's definitely like not a good guy, right?
Right, not a good
He
man.
was an icon. He was an icon at his time, and people still talk about some of his tomfoolery to this day.
I mean, when that goes in the negative icons, they do also keep the regular icons in check, right? When the ones that are popular and whatnot are going crazy and kind of getting into their thing, these negative ones can pop in and be like, "No, stop it, behave yourself. That's a chicken, not a man. Get it right." So they do serve a purpose and are necessary for a multitude of reasons, right? But since we are running up on time here, I will skip my final question. Besides, let's get our last goodbyes to you guys and how you guys final thoughts, where we can find you, all that fun stuff. So we'll start ladies first again. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. My final thoughts are that everyone doesn't need to be an icon, but everybody can be an icon, and everybody can strive to be an icon in one area of their life, whatever that is, because we have the creativity and the uniqueness to do whatever we can manage to do. And sometimes, yes, right circumstances, but some drive behind a circumstance sometimes gets you a lot farther than you ever thought you were going to get.
Fantastic. And then one more time, where can people find you?
Yep. WriteEditShare.com.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy. I love how simple your website is because you can't mess that up. Jumping over to Coach.
Yeah. Final thoughts are going to be, I have for 20 years championed the individual. I've been face to face with thousands of people. I'm here to drop a pebble in their pond so it ripples out to those closest to them. And giving someone the confidence, the energy, the can do it attitude that they need to show up for their family, for their coworkers, for their leaders, for their employees, those in their social circle is something that is really exciting to see as it starts to blossom in that person's world and in their bodies and their mind and their energy moving forward. So we can certainly leverage icons to help give us some of those pillars of Tony Robbins comes to mind. It gives us all these insights or this confidence or this energy. But ultimately, we can borrow those things, and then we need to formulate it for ourselves to impact those closest to us. And for me, I have to impact my 4 kids, my wife. And those are my center, my universe that I need to be an icon for, in a sense. So,
nice.
Where you can find me, Coach Brian Parana on the socials or brianparana.com as the easiest ways. And there you go.
Easy peasy lemon squeezy as well. All right. Being an icon for your family. Man, there's so many more things we could talk about with this. I'm sad we only have an hour. But jumping down to Guy. Guy, final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Well, I was thinking about icons, about iconoclasty, which is what essentially Satan does in the Paradise Lost. He shatters the image, that was created by God. He shatters the innocence that was fostered and cared for, by God, by actually managing to make the heart of man, to corrupt it deeply and fundamentally, and by by doing so, actually infecting all humankind for the rest of time with this kind of disease, and the disease sort of called as the original sin. But that that's I think that kind of lacuna that exists in the human soul, whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. It's not the point. The lacuna in the human soul, I think, is one of the most potent fuels for creativity and growth and development. And I think that what Kat was saying about everybody should strive to become an icon, everybody could become an icon, but everybody needs to erect their own icons in their own image. And I think what Coach was saying was great, that he strives to be an icon in his own life, a thought leader, a sort of a person, like Nietzsche said, a person, he is the author of his own book of his life. And so I think everybody should try to strive to become icons. It depends what kind of, you know, remnants or what kind of legacy you would like to leave behind after you shuffle off this mortal coil. It depends up to you as an individual, the true on um, uh, untainted, unfiltered, um, just to strive to project and express the true, intrinsic feelings and thoughts that you carry within you, and project that onto the world.
It's a hard task, but I agree it's definitely worth doing. Younger, any final thoughts on your end? Oh, sorry, wait,
Absolutely.
time out. Guy, where can people find you?
Sorry?
Where can people find you? They want to look at your stuff. Where are they going?
Oh, where can people find me? Well, you can see the name on the screen. You can type it out and find out all about. I'm not going to bore you with all my accolades and all my experience. It will take time.
Yes. The quick way is the link tree, though, right? Your name with link tree slash your name.
Yeah, Linktree is nice. Maybe I will shut it down, but maybe I don't know. But
It's
for a while, it's yeah, it's a Linktree
okay. Cool
or
beans.
Facebook,
Was gonna
or LinkedIn. Yeah.
okay. Fantastic. All those are good ones. Younger, jumping over to you. Final thoughts.
My final thought is most people in this life are blessed with or cursed with having parents, right? And those with that, those are some of your first icons. Like, oh, what is a parent supposed to be? Like, what is a mother? What is a father? Those are going to be things that are molded into you as you grow older, right? And if you have friends, you'd be like, oh, well, that person's mom like treats them really well, and unfortunately, like your mom might treat you like shit or whatever. Let's just say, in this instance, your dad's a raging alcoholic, and you have a twin brother, and you see your dad, beat your mom every day and drink heavily, is like just a terrible influence, and so you choose to like never touch alcohol in your life, never hit a woman, right? Because you watched your dad, and you were horrified by it. But then your brother goes on to become just like your dad, and he has the same excuse of, oh, well, I watched my father, So there's like elements like that. But as you grow older, like as Brian was saying, like you can learn to become the person that you wish would have been there, essentially, right? Like if you had been like in your father's position within your own family, like when you have your own family, you're like, hey, I wish my father would have done this because the bad example that was set before me, and or the good example that your loving father provided to his kid, right? And you're like, well, I could do this better, regardless of whether your dad did a good job or your dad did a bad job, right? And then you can go on through your life. People seek mentors, whether it's teachers, construction worker, boss, any number of people can hold little tiny intrinsic value of, skills or work ethic or loyalty, all these other factions that you can incorporate into your own life to turn yourself into a better person so that you can be better to those people that you care, around you. You can be a leader of your own circle, and gradually, if you have virtuous, intentions or even malevolent, you can gain influence around the people who are around you. But especially if you're virtuous, people will see your intrinsic worth, your value, see what you're able to pull off, and they'll strive to become more like you because they've seen what you've been able to do for yourself.
Yes, wholeheartedly.
I know it's long-winded, really around, but I had a couple thoughts.
I'm gonna have to start cutting you down to like 4 sentences, you yahoo. But that's okay. I think it's a good sentiment. I was a little worried there you were gonna go off the deep end there and down on a sad note, but that was a good ending.
No, it just started the discussion.
Right. But on our side of things, for where you can find us, all that fun stuff, epicsage.com, and if you're on there, you can say happy birthday or happy 4th birthday. Well, is the brain fart here. Happy 4th birthday. 4th is the number and TH for the 10% off code on the website. You want 10% off? Happy 4th birthday is all month this month because today's our birthday. Woo! Woo!
Yay! Woohoo!
Thank you. But
Whoa.
all that being said, we get to end with one final song. So we can either play a numbers game or you guys can just let me pick one. Your choice.
Pick the
Just
numbers.
pick
one.
Pick one. Okay.
Just pick one.
Yeah, pick one. The first one.
The first one. Okay. Anyway, with the adventure in mind, have a wonderful time.
Remember,
Bye.
have a wonderful time.
I did it all, crushed their lines, toppled kingdoms, shattered signs. They felt just like I said they would. Oh, the taste of triumph's good. Raise the flag, the world is mine. Toast to schemes and grand design. Let the silence bow to me. This is how it had to be. The screens are dark, the tower's low, but isn't this the final show? I grin alone, no threats remain. Their fall was worth the fleeting pain. Raise the flag, the world is mine. Toast to schemes and grand design. Let the silence bow to me. This is how it had to be. I built the end, wrote the last scene, still basking in this vivid dream. Though something tugs behind the cheer, a thought that whispers, what is here? What is here? The rival's gone, no more debate. I stroll the streets I helped create, but questions bloom beneath the pride. Like vines I thought I'd scorched and dried. Raise the flag, I've won the day, but something vital slipped away. All the power, none of the peace. Now I ache for some relief.
you